Okay, roll call, please. Oh, here. 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 Stand for the pledge, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the flag that stands of the United States of America, and for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So today we have our administrative staff along with
today,
Corey Boaz from Studio
besides our
GC. And then we have Mrs. Pisnarski and Mrs. Kohler. So thank you for joining us today.
Staff along with Corey Boaz from Studio GC. And then we have Mrs. Pisnarski and Mrs. Kohler.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for joining
I
us.
can't tell with the mask on. Okay. Approval of the consent agenda. So we have the minutes of the August 10th, 2021 meeting, open session, same date closed session, the minutes of 24th, August 24th, open session, and the closed session. And then we have a number of bills, I'm not going to go through all of them, that were paid during this last period. So we need a motion.
Consent agenda.
I'll second.
Mrs. Lammel. Aye. Mrs. Egan. Aye. Ms. Joy.
Aye.
Mr. Milkowski.
Aye.
Mrs. Lebudzik.
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. Okay, right now, we'd like to have our public participation. So who's going first?
Yeah, so I know Mrs. Kohler and Mrs. Pisnarski had signed up to speak. So whoever would like to come up first, I would ask that Gino, if you could unmute and show the video up there.
Good afternoon, or good evening, sorry. My name is Amy Kohler. I have two children in the 127.5 Chicago Ridge School District. Is that good? Okay, sorry. I have one at Finley and one at Ridge Central. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the wonderful staff members, Ms. Mallon, my daughter's speech therapist, Mr. Girk, Mrs. Mallow, and Ms. Jennings, who truly do encourage our children and work hard at what they do. I also like to thank Dr. Thorns as well, as he's been an integral help with us. With all due respect, being a parent of a child with special needs in this district has proven to be very challenging. From out of compliance IEP to communication and mistakes to there not being enough resources to meet the children's or the teacher's needs. Not to mention the very fact that ESY this year was only offered online, where summer school was offered in person for our children who are in the general education. In that case, I have made my concerns and challenges known. I will continue to advocate for my children as well as others who do not have a voice. I trust my gut and my knowledge of the rights of children with special needs. Yes, I advocate for my child to remain at her home school for several different reasons. Just one of them being the bus transportation. If I didn't advocate for my daughter, she would have been on the same bus as the current incident that had taken place a couple weeks ago. I'm going to ask you to put yourselves in our shoes. What if it was your child? What are you going to do to provide resources for our children and the staff to encourage a truly inclusive environment and improve the bus transportation? Thank you so much for having the time, giving me the time to speak today.
Good evening, Deb Pisnarski, grandmother of Colin Pisnarski. I'm here on behalf of my daughter, who's at home several weeks pregnant with twins and finds this far too emotional to handle herself, so I'll be speaking on her behalf. Diversity and inclusion, safety and concern, what's best for our children. All of these are things I have heard from the special education leadership of this school. Since this pandemic, I have fought alongside my daughter for my grandson to receive a proper education from this school district. I was asked to be patient with Zoom sessions for a non-verbal child. We asked to have an ACC device, and we received a recorder button. Now my grandchild was missing on a school bus for nearly 2 hours because he lacks communication skills. We have no idea what happened. This is not the first incident with this bus company, and yet this school district continues to allow their children to be sent to DLP and then takes zero accountability for the issues at DLP. Ultimately, diversion and inclusion, safety and concern, and what's best for the children of District 127 is in the hands of the leadership of this district. How many times has our special education director sat in a class at DLP? My daughter and I will continue to advocate, educate, and adapt. We will continue to be comfortable being uncomfortable. While my grandson may be nonverbal, he is not without a voice. He has a strong family support system with roots deep in this community, and many who believe that despite the challenges the education system is posing, we will fight to make sure he receives the best education possible, and that those who are supposed to protect him, including the leadership of School District 27.5, and that they are held accountable for that protection. Missed IEP deadlines, bus issues, non-inclusive treatment of special education children, this is not acceptable. And I hope that someone hears our outcry and that it doesn't take another incident before actions are taken. I thank you for your time and support.
Okay, superintendent's report.
I did want to touch base on really how the year started this year. And I'll get into a little bit more details in terms of COVID and things like that, but really wanted to touch base on what happened in the first couple of days. I know just this past Friday, going around the different buildings, seeing a red, white, and blue day, just watching kids out on the playground and at recess again. Those are some of the things that we really missed. And if you see in these reports from your building administrators, it's something that they highlighted because I think we missed it, the kids missed it, and it's been absolutely great to see that happening. And it's something we want to continue to see moving forward. Take a look at our enrollment report. We are very close to where we were in June. We've actually seen a decrease of one student. So that has been pretty consistent. That doesn't mean things have not been fluid with some students coming in, some students going out. But we are down one student right now. But I think it is important to know that we are down 37 from last August when we started. One of the things we have made sure that we have done as an administrative team is you hear and you read about it all the time in the paper, on the news, about how many kids are not in school. We have reached out to every single family that we know of that could possibly be either supposed to be attending here or said that they were leaving and nobody has seen them. And so we have made contact and we've got our kids in school, which is really great to see. So with our PTA report, which is the next one, the PTA is going to be holding their first meeting the first week of October. And one of the reasons, usually they've already had their meeting, we usually have bingo by the end of this month, but we're hoping that we'll be able to do more activities in person as time goes on. So we're kind of pushing the calendar back just a little bit because we know there were people who participated in Zoom bingo last year and the other activities. We also know if we can offer it in person, that is something we definitely want to do. So that first meeting will be coming up in a couple weeks. Vacant positions and possible staffing needs. we still do have some staffing that we are trying to fill. We have a library position over at Ridge Lawn that we're trying to still fill. Our junior high science position is one we are still looking for a full-time teacher in. Right now, we have a substitute who is doing a very good job, but we still are looking for a certified science teacher at the junior high. We're still working on speech pathologists as well as some paras that need to be filled. And then we have a SPED position that the board had approved at the beginning of the summer for a 4th, 5th grade split between Ridge Lawn and Ridge Central. So we are still looking to fill that, as well as the social work position that was at Finley Junior High. And many of these positions, the specific ones like a junior high science or a social worker, there just are not any applicants. Talking with some of the other feeder districts in local areas, at junior highs that are a little bit bigger than ours, but have as many as 16 classroom teachers that they have not been able to fill to start the year. So it is definitely not just a District 127.5 thing that we are looking at, but it is across the entire state that we are working through. So I know our principals and our directors have been trying to interview anyone who's coming through, but we also don't want to just put anyone in there either. So those are the things that we're kind of working through in vacant positions. Any questions on that? School year update. So our first day of school was Thursday, August 26th. That seems like a really long time ago already. And there have been a lot of adjustments, just like there were last year, but I will say our students have done a fantastic job. We've always said how flexible the kids are, and they want to be in school and they want to be interacting with people. And we are trying to allow that as much as possible. The other issue that we knew was going to be, that's not just here, but a lot of places, is even for our district with Sunrise School Bus and just having enough bus drivers. We usually have a minimum of 10 routes. We've had as many as 11 and 12. And so we were provided with 5 bus drivers. And Julie Bazian, our transportation coordinator, has worked with all the administrators. They sat down and looked at schedules. And so right now, our last students are, the latest they're getting dropped off is at 8:16, which is still 6 minutes after the school day starts, which is not great. But talking, I know at the high school, it's been very difficult, and just talking with other schools that we are in pretty good shape. And then our last group, and it's only our junior high students, but are getting picked up between 3:20 and 3:22. So we have supervision for them. They're in different classrooms at the end of the day, hopefully doing homework, but they're junior high students, so we know how that probably goes. But so they are getting home about 20 minutes later than they would on any other year. And we are hopeful with the vaccine mandate that we don't see a lot of bus drivers drop off, but that is something we can continue to hear across the state that may happen coming up. So that's something we're watching. I just wanted to share some COVID numbers with you. I don't have my fancy graph that I showed every single time last year, but as of Friday, we had 1 positive staff member at this time, as well as 3 positive students and 5 students who were quarantined for either positive cases or contact out of school. So that's where we were on Friday. I think it's important to note that when we track who is quarantined, we are talking about people who are either positive or close contacts. What we do have a ton of are students who have to go home for symptoms. Many of these students are going home on a Wednesday. They either get tested Wednesday, most of them are getting tested Wednesday, and they're back at school on Thursday with the proof of the negative test. But we are sending a lot of kids home for that, so I want you to be aware of that. The last part I really wanted to touch base on the update is when I presented back at the beginning of August, we discussed the mitigation strategies and having them all in place when we started school and seeing how things went and really understanding which strategies we could back off of as we move forward. And a couple of the ones we are looking at is junior high lockers. I know that in the classrooms that the teachers and the students would really like to be able to put their backpacks in the lockers, so that it's just not in the way in the classroom. And then at the elementary level, really looking at some type of a shared supplies, even if there's some cleaning in between. So those are a couple of the mitigation strategies we would look at possibly removing and seeing how that goes. But I still would like to go about another week just to make sure we don't see a surge from the Labor Day weekend. But those are 2 of the mitigation strategies we're looking at removing. So any questions on the beginning of the school year? Yes.
When is this?
Yep.
But I know that some parents have expressed that getting the same day or rapid result test is difficult or lack insurance, having to go to your pediatrician. So I know, offers of school, I was curious when that's going to be available and how parents would know how to use that service.
Yeah, so the shield testing coming in, and it would be more of a once a week test. They wouldn't be here every day to test as needed, but it would be a screener test. We were scheduled to start on Thursday. Myself and a couple of the administrators and our nurse met with, it's called Shield, and it's run by the state of Illinois. And they are not going to be ready Thursday, even though we've been sending them email after email. They said they are hopeful that it would be the following week. We have another meeting with them at 9 a.m. tomorrow. And then if I get any additional information, no matter what, I will be sending out a letter on Thursday, both to our staff, who some are signed up for that, as well as the parents. And right now, I believe we have about 143 students who are signed up for shield testing. But that stays open throughout. It usually takes about a week, we were told. Once they sign up, it's usually the following week that they would be added to that.
I don't know if it's a possibility, but I think it would only include the district to possibly have a resource handout for students who are sent home via the nurse. These are areas where you can go for free tests so you can get back as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I will say, and I think that's a great idea, but I will say when I was looking myself, I do know there's one right in front of Dick's Sporting Goods that is kind of tried up, you tested, and they say that the results are usually available within 24 hours. So, Mrs. Egan?
So are rapid results accepted? They don't need a PCR?
This is the shield test is a PCR test.
No, that's for screening only though, right? So someone with symptoms cannot just take the shield test here at
Correct.
school.
Yes.
So if students are being sent home with symptoms, they can do a rapid, they don't need the PCR?
My understanding is still a PCR test.
Okay.
Yes. And I will say that changes, the guidance we get changes constantly.
Well, I know the high school's PCR.
Yes.
And then you said many students are being sent home for symptoms. Are you talking like they coughed once or multiple symptoms?
And I would ask some of our administrators to talk to the ones who are with them. So.
Yeah, so I would say most of our elementary students are being already know is a consistent cough. It's then up to the nurse calls the parents to ensure that this is something that is documented how we first are checking problem.
So then I mean, if you're saying many students, I'm assuming that legitimately means many, that's a lot, then I would hope that there's follow-up being looked at in terms of how many are being sent home versus how many are actually coming back positive. Because for kids to miss 2 days of school to wait for the PCR because somebody said they sniffled one too many times would be a disservice.
And I know one example is on Monday, we had 25 parents at Ridge Central call their kids out. So we don't even know what those are, but they said we have
Parents,
to get.
but I'm saying if it's teachers who are sending them.
Yeah, and again, I would ask on average how many you're getting on a day.
Yeah, I see it's more with parents calling the liquid symptoms than it is with kids being sent home from school.
Okay.
Am I mistaken in thinking that it doesn't have to be a negative test or it has to be an ultimate diagnosis? So if you go to the doctor.
If the doctor says.
You don't have to go get a COVID test and you're okay. I mean, obviously not getting from that instructor for 4 hours. But
Yes.
if the doctor says it's a sinus infection or alternative diagnosis.
That's correct. Yes, either one is fine.
That's what it was in the past.
Yep. And we've been told now, I think for the last 4 weeks that we're going to get updated guidance on this. But my understanding is that a lot of the upper level people at the state, both at the health department and at ISB have changed and they can't agree on anything. So that's why we have not seen anything to this point. So. 4.6, approve grants. In your packet, you'll see Title I, Title II, and the Early Childhood Preschool for All. Those have been recently approved by the Illinois State Board of Education. And I do want to point out that we have a goal as an administration, and that's to continue to work through our ESSER 3 grant. Remember, that needs to be spent by September 30th of 2024. So we're hoping that we will have what we can present to the board at our October meeting, so next month. So that we can kind of talk about that as it moves. 4.7, just wanted to let the board know I am planning on going down to the Illinois Superintendent's Conference down in Springfield at the end of this month. It's a 3-day conference. Last year it was held virtually. This year they are planning on having it in person. I was very impressed with some of the different things. The first day I'm going down, it's going to be a health and life safety, an entire day on it, which works really well for us because we are being audited. It's our turn in the 3 to 5 year cycle to be audited this year. So there's some really good things. And again, it's a great time to network and hear what other schools are doing, hear what they're doing for testing in their buildings. And so that I hope to use that time down there for that. For 4.8, later in the meeting, the board will be asked to approve changing the September study session from September 28th to next Tuesday, the 21st. And really that is, we want to get started on our strategic plan. That will be our time to work with Dr. Madonia. And we wanted to move it up so that we can get started on it. And so it seemed like almost everyone was available for that. And we're going to really be focusing on developing the areas of focus that we have 5 currently and decide if we want to keep any of those or if we want to adjust it. And then as well as just if there needs to be any type of refinement on the vision and mission work that we are doing. And then finally, my last thing is for 4.9, the amended calendar for this school year. When we created the calendar, as it has been for as long as I've paid attention, our primary election has been in March. The governor, it was like May 30th, did change that to June 28th. So right now on our student calendar, we have a random Tuesday off in March for a Teacher Institute Day, which does not make a lot of sense. So really looking at Richard's calendar and trying to figure out a date that makes sense for our families, we settled on Friday, February 18th, because that Monday is also President's Day. So that will give our families who have students here and at Richards a 4-day weekend together. So that is what I would recommend the board vote on later. Any other questions for me? All right, I don't know about you, but I've been waiting all week for Kathy's budget presentation to us. So I am going to turn that over to her.
Good? Okay.
Okay, so what is included in our budget is our statement of our beginning year's balances along with our ending cash on hand and our estimated cash receipts and the estimated cash disbursements. Okay, so we just said the components are going to be our revenue, our expenses, and our fund balances. And our fund balances in school business accounting, every major section of our school has its own fund. The educational fund and O&M fund are just two examples. So when you hear the term fund balance, it's really the money in the bank. And then we have three major sources of revenue that we always like to talk about. We have our federal, our state, and our local sources of revenue. The main source of our state revenue comes from the Illinois State Board of Education, and that is our evidence-based funding. Currently, we are a tier school, tier 1 school, which means we are below a certain level of adequacy. Right now, our school is at 61% adequacy target, which is good because we have increased. We started off in the mid-50s. This is year 5 of the evidence-based funding, so we have increased to 61%, but the state of Illinois is still saying we're only at 61% of adequacy. We have a long way to go to have the necessary funding to educate our students. The base minimum funding that you're going to see in the budget is what we received last year. We always budget very conservatively because in the past, Illinois has not always given schools what they promised. So we always budget conservatively. So we're going to put roughly $10.5 million from evidence-based funding into this year's budget. Now, the state is also telling us we are going to get $723,000 more. We are not going to put that in our budget now until we see it. We always say if we receive it, it's a great surprise at the end of the year, but we're not going to count on it. The other sources of state revenue are our categorical payments. Those are our regular and special ed transportation claim, our special education private facility and orphanage claim, along with our state free breakfast and lunch. Then we also have a couple of grants in there. One of our largest state grants is the Early Childhood Block Grant. We have a very small career grant and then after school grants. So the other sources of revenue in here, this category alone is about $1.2 million. Okay, local sources of revenue, what is that? That means our local property taxes, our investments on, our interest on investments, and local fees. That in total is $8.1 million. And as you can imagine, the majority of that is going to be coming from our local property taxes. How we budget property tax revenue is, we all know we're always a year behind in paying those taxes. So we're going to budget for school year FY22, we're going to be budgeting for the second half of the 2020 levy and the first half of the 21 levy, which will be done in November. We also put in an estimated collection rate of 95%. The last 2 years, it's actually fluctuated between about 97.5% to 98%, which is a really fantastic rate. Again, we budget conservatively, so we're estimating about 95% collection there. Federal sources of revenue are grants, our Title I, which is for our low income, Title II, teacher quality, Title III is our English learners, and a majority of it comes from our national lunch school breakfast programs. Okay, this year and last year, we were introduced to several more federal sources of revenue known as the Ester Grants. Last year, we got Ester 1 and 2, and then also they gave us some more money in terms of federal grants, digital equity, digital professional learning, and some more early childhood. The reason those grants are in this presentation is because we spent some of the money last year, but we will be getting it this year.
So we have to count that into this year's revenue stream. So what is in our budget right now for the federal revenue is $3.6 million. And about 1.5 of that alone is from ESSER 1 and ESSER 2. Revenue assumptions, I always like to share with the board and the community what is going in, because it's not all simple math. We have to make some generalized assumptions. So evidence-based funding, I already said, we're just budgeting what we got last year. Property taxes I talked about. The federal grants is what is Illinois State Board of Education is telling us. The state categoricals, we are budgeting for 1 from FY21 because we spend the money and then we get it a few months later, and 3 for FY22. So this is one area where we're not really being conservative. We are saying the state is going to in fact pay our 4 categoricals. And then interest on investments, we've had several really good years. And so we're actually estimating about 90% of FY21 actual for interest on investments. Okay, the next couple of slides are just some nice visuals that I'll show you. Our revenue by sources. It's a little bit hard to read, but you can see the red is evidence-based funded. That's 10.5, almost 50% of our revenue comes from the state. And then in the bottom right, the blue you'll see is the local property taxes. That's another 7.5 million. I prefer this graph a little bit because it shows our percentages. Evidence-based funding, it looks like 45%. Local property tax, 32%. Okay, so now that's the revenue side of it. That's the money we're getting in to pay our bills. This is what we're going to put together to pay our bills. And same thing with revenue. We have some assumptions we have to put in. There's a lot we know, but there's a lot we don't know. So for the salaries and other, we always put in our certified and non-certified salary increase. We also built into this budget a few extra dollars for contracted positions. We all know teacher shortages, speech pathologists. There's a lot of positions we cannot hire through the school, so we're putting them in contracted positions. COVID-19 expenses, we have our cleaning staff, we have PPE and all the necessary supplies. ESSER expenses, we have in their classroom furniture, 2 special ed teachers, 1 at Finley and then 1 to be shared at between Lawn and Central, and then a social worker at Finley. Now, not all of those positions have been filled. We will continue to interview them and hopefully we would be able to fill those positions. And then your basic educational materials in summer school. That's also included in ESSER. Some building improvements. We're projecting $1.9 million to be spent on capital projects. And that is due to the issuance of the $5 million in working cash bonds that we did last year. So totally anticipated. So what makes up that amount is the amount we owe on fiscal year 21 improvements. We had our roofing, we had our lighting. Not all of that was paid for yet. So that cash outflow is going to come this year, along with new capital projects that we planned on, mechanical, site work, interior, and some educational environments or furniture. Expenses by fund. This tells the Board of Education how we are spending it in those funds that I had mentioned earlier. So education, $18.7 million. That's what it's going to cost to educate our students. Well, you also have O&M there. We have to clean the buildings. We have to maintain the buildings. We have our utilities. So all of this graph shows how we are going to spend $25 million. Same thing, just the percentages. Education fund, 74%, transportation, 3%. You can see. Then up in the right, the capital projects, 8%. That's very high because we have the working cash obligation bonds to spend. Expenses by object. This is going to break that $25 million on what it is we're spending it on. As you can see, 46% is on salaries alone. and benefits is 2.1 million. Together, those make up 54% of our salaries. Traditionally, that percentage is actually much higher, but with having the capital projects in there this year, it's a little bit distorted because that's historically more like 70% is spent on the salaries and benefits. Okay, this is something we share with the board every month. And basically what it does is it breaks it down by fund, how much we have at the beginning of the year, which is July 1, the sources of revenue, the uses of revenue, and how much we're projected to end at the end of the year. So the only difference with this, as opposed to what I traditionally display, is before and after capital projects. Because if you look at that before capital project line, we actually see that our fund balance is increasing $108,000. And historically, we have always presented a balanced budget. We're very proud of that. But when you think about spending $1.9 million on capital projects, that is money that was received last year. So very important to note that we will actually be decreasing our fund balance, but that was planned, that was anticipated. And then here's just a real big quick breakdown of what I said. So overall, the change in fund balance at the end of this year, we're projecting to have $1.8 million less than when we started. Okay, a couple of things that are not included in the budget. Again, we have to make some assumptions. The additional evidence-based funding we talked about, one categorical we talked about, we're not anticipating to get that, and that is fine. Unforeseen COVID-19 costs in excess of the grants. We are not budgeting more than we're anticipating the grants. And I think we all hope that that one really is true, because that would be very not good. The last thing I wanted to talk about that's not included is our American Rescue Plan Ester Grants that Dr. Thorns alluded to a little bit earlier. The next task we're going to have to do is put together that budget. A couple reasons why it's not budgeted for. The expenses that we spend will be offset by the revenue. So it's virtually a wash. Money's going to go out, but it's going to come right back in. So from a financial standpoint, from a cash flow standpoint, it's okay that it's not in there. And so just wanted to point out that that is not in there. So really the only thing we're going to do now is we're going to hold a public hearing. I will ask or be happy to answer any questions anyone might have. I know it's a lot of information that we throw at you, so and then we just file it with the Illinois State Board of Education, and we go from there. So does anyone have any questions? Okay.
I would just like to point out two things from your presentation. The first one is with evidence-based funding, and I know you mentioned it, but I think it's really important. The state set an adequate target, and they have continued to give us more and more towards that. We are still only at 61% of the funding that they say is required to educate a child. So I think that's really important to remember as you hear the state talk about cutting funds and that they can't continue to send it. Well, they're already not sending what they said they were going to. So although what they have sent has helped us tremendously, we've been able to add a lot from that. They still tell us that they owe us more. So I think that's really important. And then I just wanted to touch base on the end there. You talked about decreasing the fund balance. And we hear a lot about making sure you're not spending. Touch base on that for a second.
Sure, thank you. When I hear deficit spending, business managers panic, because that means you are spending more than you're taking in, which basically means you got to change up what you're doing because you're not financially solvent. But in this case, our operating revenue, if you will, is a positive 108,000. We're only 1.8 million deficit because we're spending $1.9 million that we received in cash the following year. Now, what's important to know is when we sold those working cash bonds last year, the board made a very good decision about spending the 5 million in bonds, of course, but we also pledged to spend another 4.2 million, I think it was, because we do have fund balances that we could put to good use. So eventually, we will be dipping into those fund balances even more. But again, it was planned, it was normal part of operation. Yeah, Nancy? You know, the question is the state kind of threatening to penalize us for having money in the bank? And it's been rather quiet, but for anyone not familiar with it, the state is always looking for creative ways to allocate money. And for a little while, they were talking about a district such as ours that has been very responsible and financially solid to actually allocate less money, because we do have enough money in the bank to pay for, you know, let's say 260 days of, you know, operating costs. But actually that has been pretty quiet. And personally, I just don't think that is a way of rewarding a financially, you know, responsible.
Are we still held accountable too, that if we lower our fund balance, it hurts our credit?
You know, there is a correlation when the auditors, and they will actually be coming next month, I believe, to share the financial results, is there is a ratio they look at, and that does look at our fund balance. Not necessarily do we get dinged, but it is part of the complete picture for that financial profile. Well said.
This district, even longer, I've been on this board for years, but even before me, this district has always been very fiscally responsible.
Extremely.
As far back as I can remember, taught for years, so they've always been very fiscally responsible.
Agreed. Okay, thank you.
Oh, the slide's still up
Yeah,
there.
the slides are still up. You gotta wait a second.
Okay, get that out of there.
There you go.
Okay, so I have to pound the gavel.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so that was just number 5.1, guys.
Oh, no, yeah, there's a lot more.
I'm ready to gavel it, you know? I know.
Okay, 5.2 is the ISB federal and state monitoring review. In June, we were selected by the Illinois State Board of Education to have several of our grants reviewed. And they actually reviewed 9 of our grants from FY20. They looked at early childhood, Title I, Title II, Title III, and all of the Ester grants. And there's 5 Ester grants in total. And they just completed that review last month. And unfortunately, we did have a finding. A finding means that in their audit process, they found something that was not done correctly. They bring it to our attention and we need to do a corrective action plan. So they did find an over expenditure in our Title I grant of approximately $21,000. And what that means is we spend grant money, we submit a report to ISB, ISB gives us the money back. So when I submitted the final report, I inadvertently overstated our expenditures by $21,000. And the reason that happened was those checks were cut for the math pilot program. And keep in mind, this was back in August of 2020. That was the year they were auditing. And so what happened is with COVID and things, we never did the math pilot. So what we did actually just a couple months ago is we voided that check. So we got the money back because we never cashed the check. We never mailed it out because we went in a different direction. But I had already submitted the expenditure report to ISB. So now ISB is telling us, and it is valid, that they want that $21,000 back. It is cash neutral to us because it's on a reimbursement basis. We voided the check. We're really not entitled to that $21,000, and they are asking for it back. The only thing I still have waiting to hear from ISB is because of COVID, the Illinois State Board of Education allowed us to carry over all of the Title I grant money. Usually there's a limit of 15%. Well, I'm hoping they'll kind of appeal to us because if we didn't spend it and it was not reported correctly like I should have, technically that $21,000 would have rolled over into FY21. So I don't know if they're going to allow that to happen, but certainly we put our corrective action plan, we submitted that to ISB, so that's where we're at with that. Does anybody have any questions on that one? Okay, 535455 is really what I like to call housekeeping. ISB requires us to post and share with the Board of Education documents on an annual basis. So the first one is the administrator's compensation report that will be in your board packet. And then after today, we will post that on the district website. Then they also want to see the IMRF salary report. And that is any employee with a total compensation package of more than $75,000 that needs to be on our website. So that's in there. And then also Public Act 970256 is the administrator and teacher salary for the prior year. So that is also in your report and that will be posted on the website tomorrow. Okay, 5.6 hazardous routes. We do always need to reauthorize our hazardous bus routes, and that helps us get our transportation claim processed. Nothing has changed. The routes are still the same. They're listed in your board packet, but we will be asking the board to approve those. School-sponsored activity list. Every year I share that list with the administrators to see if anything has changed, and we'll be asking you to approve that later in the meeting. Okay, last thing here, I promise. Capital planning for FY22. In August of just last meeting, we shared with you the capital planning projects that we are anticipating doing for the upcoming school year. Keep in mind, some of those might be over the summer and they might go into the following year. And I also included them on the slide budget. And so what we're going to share with you tonight is a little bit more detail on those plans, along with the planning schedule to go out for bid. Now, I have listed just a very, very short explanation of these projects. And so Corey with Studio GC is in the audience. So after I kind of just go through that, if anybody has any very specific questions on this, we've invited him to be able to help us out on that. Okay, so the first thing is the rooftop units. There are 3 large rooftop units over at Finley and 5 or 6 smaller air handling units at Ridge Central. And at the start of COVID, we verified with the architect that our air quality is fine. And I want you to know it is certainly acceptable. We are adequate. We are meeting all sorts of guidelines. But we're actually thinking with COVID and the enhanced ventilation, you know, it might be a good time to move that up. Those projects were actually scheduled for FY24. Then laboratories. Really what we would be doing is just looking to improve any sort of broken fixtures, things that aren't working up to their potential in all 3 buildings. And then there's some exterior work, some asphalt paving, sidewalks, and masonry. again, things that need repair. It's time. A lot of these areas have not been upgraded in a while. And we all know masonry, you know, a little water can do a lot more damage in the future if it's not taken care of. Landscaping is really just some, you know, a little bit of beautification. You know, I think a little bit of work out on our outside of our buildings goes a long way for the general appearance. Carpet and walk-off CVT. Studio GC has also done a little bit of this work already because it was scheduled for last year. But when we received the favorable bids on the roofing, this got pushed back. And basically they walk through the buildings, and anywhere there is carpeting, that would be replaced. Any room that would have carpeting and tile, that all would be replaced and tile would be put in there. And then finally, we would continue purchasing classroom furniture for all three buildings. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, okay, I do not have any other. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're moving on to 7.1 with the annual budget hearing for Chicago Ridge School District 127.5 FY22 budget. So I am calling the hearing to order right now. And is there anyone who has any comments or concerns regarding the budget? I have to ask this 3 times. So does anyone have any comments or concerns regarding the budget? And one, yes.
And I could only hear some of what you were saying, but gender,
So there's an issue in Springfield pending right now with extra knowledge when the parents go back and public place. You have to adjust gender equality in any public place bathroom. So if you're going to have a plan that spends money in restrooms, is that issue being addressed before we spend that money outside of the bathroom?
Yeah, and all I can say for that right now is that working with Studio GC over the last few years, they are aware of every single bill that ever goes on in Springfield, and I've been really impressed with their knowledge of that. And they bring all of that information to us so that we can make the right decision for our district. Yep.
Okay, so one last time, does anybody have any comments or concerns regarding the budget? No? Hearing close. Okay, 7.2, potential board action to adopt the Chicago Ridge Public School District 127.5 22 budget. Motion.
Mrs. Lamel on the motion for that. Mrs. Petropoulos?
Aye.
Mr. Melkowski? Aye. Ms. Joy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lamel?
Aye.
Mrs. Egan? Mrs. Lebudzik?
Aye.
And Mrs. Salzer?
I'll make a motion. I'll second the motion.
Mr. Melkowski? Aye. Mrs. Lebudzik?
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos?
Aye.
Mrs. Egan?
Aye.
Mrs. Lamel?
Aye. Aye.
And Mrs. Salzer?
7.4, potential board action to approve hazardous walking routes for school year 2021-22. Motion.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Ms. Joy? Aye. Mrs. Egan?
Aye.
Mrs. Lebudzik?
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos?
Aye.
Mrs. Lamel?
Aye.
Mr. Melkowski?
Aye.
Salzer?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Mrs. Egan.
Aye.
Ms. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mrs. Lammle.
Aye.
Mr. Mihalkowski. Ms. Joy.
Aye.
Mrs. Lebudzick.
Aye.
And Mrs. Salzer.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second the motion.
Mrs. Lebudzick.
Aye.
Mrs. Egan.
Aye.
Mrs. Lammle. Ms. Joy.
Aye.
Mr. Mihalkowski. Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mrs. Salzer.
I'll second it.
Mrs. Lammle.
Aye.
Ms. Joy.
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mrs. Egan.
Aye.
Mrs. Lebudzick.
Aye.
Mr. Mihalkowski. And Mrs. Salzer.
7.8, potential board action to approve payment to Twin Supplies in the amount of $63,410.40 for lighting improvements. Motion.
Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mrs. Egan.
Aye.
Mr. Mihalkowski. Ms. Joy.
Aye.
Mrs. Lammle. Mrs. Lebudzick.
Aye.
Mrs. Salzer.
7.9, potential board action to change September study session date from the September 28th to September 21st. Motion. Second.
Mrs. Egan. Mr. Mihalkowski. Ms. Joy.
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos. Mrs. Lammle. Mrs. Lebudzick.
Aye.
And Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. 7.10, potential board action to approve amended calendar for 21-22 school year.
I'll make the motion.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
And Mrs. Lebudzick on the second. Mr. Mihalkowski. Mrs. Egan. Mrs. Lammle.
Aye.
Joy.
Aye.
Mrs. Lebudzick.
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. 7.11, potential board action to approve contract for Spotter LLC for candidate search in the amount of $18,000.
And I did want to touch base on this one. This was for one of our speech pathologist positions we've been trying to fill. We have been looking at some contract agencies, which always charge more than a regular salary employee. And so we had an employee who had applied, said she really wished she had seen the posting, which I was surprised she didn't, because we posted in 4 different places that everyone is well aware of. But she did go to the company to see if they would be willing to allow her to do that, because usually once they sign on with a company, they are not willing to do it. So this is actually the finder's fee that they are willing to let her out of the contract. And it is very hard for me to recommend that we spend $18,000 for them finding someone, but this would still be over $20,000 cheaper on top of that 18,000 if we went this route and hired someone that we were very impressed with in the interview, that we would have hired directly if she would have applied. So although it is hard to recommend an $18,000 fee, it still saves us over $20,000 of what we would have spent. So I would be recommending that.
I'll make a motion.
Mrs. Lebudzick.
Aye.
Ms. Joy.
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mrs. Egan.
Aye.
Mrs. Lammle. Mr. Mihalkowski. Mrs. Salzer.
Aye. 7.12, potential board action to authorize Studio GC to prepare the capital projects design specifications for school year 22. Motion.
I'll make the motion.
Ms. Joy. Mrs. Lammle.
Aye.
Egan.
Aye.
Mr. Mihalkowski. Mrs. Lebudzick.
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos. And Mrs. Salzer.
7.13, potential board action to authorize Studio GC to request bids for capital projects in school year year 22.
I'll make a motion.
Mrs. Lammle.
Aye.
Mr. Malkowski. Ms. Joy.
Aye.
Mrs. Petropoulos. Mrs. Egan.
Aye.
Mrs. Lebuncic.
Aye.
Mrs. Sauer.
Aye. I need a sign on my forehead. Okay, President's prerogative. I know we did have that one misfortune with the bus, but as regarding the opening of the school year, thank you for doing the job you do, because I talk to Dr. Thorns daily, even though I went back to work. He still calls me daily. But anyhow, we talk all the time, and I get to hear about the wonderful things that are happening. The kids are excited to be here again. I mean, I wish we didn't have to wear the mask, but we do, and hopefully that will be over in a few months. I don't know. But thank you for everything that you do and getting this year off successfully, especially after the last year and a half that you guys have dealt with. So thank you. Gino, thank you too. Okay, we are going to adjourn to closed session.
For the purpose of the discussion of the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity. However, a meeting to consider an increase in compensation of a specific employee of a public body that is subject to the Local Government Wage Increase Transparency Act may not be closed and shall be open to the public and posted and held in accordance with this act as defined in the Open Meetings Act, Section 2C1. The discussion of collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or the representatives or deliberations concerning salary schedule for one or more classes of employees and described in Section 2C2. The discussion of pending or probable and imminent litigation against, affecting, or on behalf of the district is defined in Section 2C11, and the discussion of minutes of prior meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act is defined in Section 2C21 for the purpose of review, approval, or release of such minutes. There will be no discussion of student discipline or security measures during this closed session.
Okay, we need to close the meeting.
Yep, made motion.
Can I have a motion to close the meeting?
Second.
Mrs. Lebuncic.
Aye.
Mr. Malkowski. Ms. Joy.
Aye.
Ms. Egan. Mrs. Petropoulos.
Aye.
Mrs. Lammle.
Aye.
We're heading into closed session.